Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Renegade Immortal episode number 173 based on novel. So let's start. Wang Lin whispered, "Senior Juyi." He could feel that aside from external forces, the main reason for Juyi's death aura was himself. He wholeheartedly wanted to die. After Wang Lin saw the formation before him, he knew that he couldn't break this formation. If anyone could break this formation, it could only be Juyi himself. Although Wang Lin's voice was soft, it echoed through the cracks. Juyi's eyes trembled as he slowly opened them. His eyes were empty, and within this emptiness there was ultimately sadness. His face was still in a daze. Just at this moment, Ling Qianho's divine sense broke through the golden cage. It turned around and charged directly at Wang Lin once more. A soft sigh echoed across the crack. The sigh came from Juyi, and at the moment the sigh spread across the cave, Ling Qianho's divine sense charging toward Wang Lin immediately collapsed. This sword energy dissipated but reformed into a ball of light that floated motionlessly above the fourth sword. "You should leave." Juyi still hadn't looked at Wang Lin. He closed his eyes once more. Wang Lin's origin soul suffered great injuries just to get here, and now he didn't even have the power to leave. His origin soul was now only the size of a baby, and its originally crystal clear body was now murky. He had used all of his spells and everything he had to finally reach this point, because Juyi was his benefactor. However, after doing all of this, all he got were those three plain words from Juyi. "You should leave." Wang Lin revealed a thick, mocking smiling. This smile wasn't toward other people but toward himself. "Your heart is already dead, and I indeed shouldn't have come." Wang Lin shook his head and turned around to leave. At the moment he entered here and lost 6 portions of his origin soul, he had already repaid his debt to Juyi. Heart is dead. At the moment Tinga left, my heart really did die. The sadness on Juyi's dazed face became even stronger. In the several hundred years he had been sealed here by Ling Qianho, he had constantly been in a state of confusion. He knew of the ancient demon's invasion, but he didn't want to stop it. However, the golden light was his love for Ting-er, and he didn't want to throw it away. After letting out a sigh, Juyi raised his completely purple right hand and flicked his finger. A ray of golden light suddenly appeared, and it contained a very powerful sword energy. This was the same sword energy that put Ling Qianho in such a sorry state. This was the life sword energy of the Rain Celestial Sword. Juyi only had 99 rays of this sword energy. When he was hunting Ling Qianho, he used most of his life sword energy. Now he only had 4 rays left. The sword energy charged directly at the ball of light above the fourth sword and directly pierced through it. Although Ling Qianho's divine sense was powerful, it couldn't compare to Juyi's Rain Celestial Sword life sword energy. The ball of light shattered and Ling Qianho's divine sense was destroyed. The divine sense turned into specks of light. With the help of the sword energy, the specks of light flowed into Wang Lin's body. At this moment, those specks of light entered Wang Lin's origin soul. His damaged origin soul began to recover at a crazy speed. In almost an instant, not only did his origin soul completely recover, it also had a feeling of expanding. This feeling slowly stopped, but the remaining specks of light didn't dissipate. They automatically found Ling Qianho's sword energy inside Wang Lin's origin soul and fused with it. The sword energy suddenly became 30% more powerful than before. Juyi slowly said, "My life sword energy can't be stored inside you, so I can't give it to you. You were injured because of me, so I helped you recover. You should go. Don't come back." Wang Lin let out a sigh and started walking toward the exit. Then he slapped the bag of holding and the pagoda with Juyi's divine sense appeared. Wang Lin looked at it before throwing it behind him. "I have already completed the promise from back then. I will no longer guard this pagoda." Juyi suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the pagoda. The sadness in his eyes was enough to cover the sky. "Ting-er." Wang Lin's foot stopped, but he didn't turn around. He said, "Her name is not Ting-er. If my guess is correct, her name is Qing Shuang." Juyi's spirit body trembled. He raised his head, and the emptiness in his eyes had disappeared. Instead, it was replaced with energy. Qing Shuang? Wang Lin turned around and looked at Juyi. He didn't speak, but through Qing Lin's jade. Juyi's eyes narrowed and he caught the jade. He immediately scanned it with his divine sense and his expression changed. After a long time, he bitterly said to himself, Qing Shuang. Wang Lin's voice was calm as he slowly said, the daughter of Celestial Emperor Qing Lin. This Qing Lin was the most powerful person in the Celestial Realm. Rumors have it that he escaped when the Celestial Realm collapsed. He is hidden in his cave in this demon spirit land, healing. The energy in his eyes became even more intense, and a trace of vitality gradually appeared in his body. The purple gas around him began to speed up, but it couldn't stop his vitality from appearing. You are saying that Tinger's father is healing in a cave here? Wang Lin, are you sure about this? Wang Lin looked at Juyi and shook his head. I didn't see it with my own eyes, so I'm uncertain. The confusion on Juyi's face gradually disappeared as he muttered, right, how can anyone be sure of these kinds of things? Only. If Tinger's father is really here, then with his cultivation, he must be able to awaken Tinger. The current Juyi seemed to have forgotten that Tinger was only a residual soul fragment formed in the female corpse from his 1,000 years of obsession. It was now gone and no longer existed. I want to take Tinger to meet her father and let Tinger wake up. The vitality in Juyi's body became stronger and stronger. The purple gas surrounding him seemed to have gone crazy. It charged at the speck of golden light between his eyebrows like crazy. Scatter for me. His eyes lit up and the purple gas surrounding him immediately began to struggle in an attempt to retaliate. However, it had no effect and was quickly expelled from Juyi's body. Soon, all of the purple gas was forced out of Juyi's body and the large cloud of purple gas disappeared through the formation on the ground. Juyi was the Rain Celestial Sword Spirit. If the ancient demon of the Water Demon country personally came, then Juyi might not stand a chance since he only had 3 life sword energies left. However, simply expelling the ancient demon's demonic spiritual energy was not difficult for Juyi. The purple gas disappeared and Juyi's body was crystal clear like flowing water. He looked at the pagoda and waved his right hand. A ray of sword energy immediately flew out from the tower. This sword was small and it was obvious from its appearance that it was made for a female. This sword was one of the Rain Celestial Swords. Juyi was the Rain Celestial Sword Spirit. His body turned into a ray of light and immediately flew into this small sword. At this moment, the crack was filled with sword energy. Just at this moment, the remaining 3 balls of light immediately flew into the air. They turned into divine sense and flew at Juyi. A cold snort came from the sword, and a ray of Juyi's life sword energy immediately flew out. An earth-shattering sound suddenly echoed across the entire tide abyss. It was as if the fierce sword energy wanted to cut open the entire tide abyss. The 3 balls of light immediately shattered and were devoured by Juyi. As for the projections of the 4 swords on the ground, they were also shattered by the life sword energy. The formation on the ground shattered with the swords. The crack that sealed Juyi immediately collapsed. Ling Jianhu, although you had me sealed for hundreds of years, if it wasn't for the fact my heart was dead, how could your seal trap me? I'm the Rain Celestial Sword Spirit. My life is as long as the heavens and earth and I inherited the 4 great sword intent from ancient times. Although I can't kill you, unless I allow it, you can't seal me. In these hundreds of years, although my heart was dead, I could constantly feel the inheritance of the ancient sword intent. If we meet again, let us see whether or not my cultivation is still the same as before. Juyi flew out the moment before the crack collapsed. Wang Lin immediately followed Juyi. 1 sword and 1 person appeared outside the crack. Juyi appeared from the celestial sword. He still looked the same as before, only it looked like more time had passed. He held the pagoda in his hand. After looking at the pagoda, he sent it to Wang Lin. Wang Lin, keep this safe for me. Wang Lin nodded. He caught the pagoda and put it inside his bag of holding. Juyi's gaze fell on Wang Lin, and there was a hint of gratitude in his eyes. He said, "For you to reach this step in just a few hundred years is worthy of congratulations." Wang Lin let out a sigh and said, "Thanks to Senior for the Ascendant Crystal." Otherwise, Wang Lin shook his head and didn't go on. "The Ascendant Crystal was your reward for guarding Ting so there is no need to thank me. If there is any thanks to be said, it should be me thanking you. I didn't think that the two of us would meet again after several hundred years. Thinking about it now, if it wasn't for the fact that you were determined to find me, we wouldn't have met today." Juyi saw that Wang Lin wanted to speak, but he waved his hand to stop Wang Lin. He pondered for a bit and asked, "Wang Lin, I remember there were 2 celestial swords in the pagoda. Do you still have the other one?" Wang Lin slapped his bag of holding and the celestial sword Shuligua was in flew out. Shuligua was inside the celestial sword and immediately felt Juyi's existence. He was also a spirit body, so the feeling he had at this moment was very strong. The other was like the master of all sword spirits, and he was in awe. He even felt that this person was the real sword spirit of the sword he was in. He was merely in someone else's home. Eh? After Juyi saw the celestial sword, his eyes lit up. He pointed with his right hand and Shuligua immediately flew out from the celestial sword. His face was filled with the urge to flatter. This was even more intense than when he was facing Wang Lin. "Senior, Junior's name is Shuligua. It was my master who made me live inside the celestial sword, it was not because I wanted to." Wang Lin's expression immediately became ugly and he coldly looked at Shuligua. Juyi laughed and said to Wang Lin, "Wang Lin, I can't pass my spells onto you, but this spirit body is pretty good. I can allow him to comprehend the ancient sword intent and accelerate his growth until he can completely control this celestial sword." Shuligua was startled. His eyes turned and he carefully said, "That? Senior, what is this ancient sword intent?" Juyi faintly smiled and said, "Feel it and you will know." With that, his right hand reached out and immediately grabbed Shuligua. A ray of light shot out from his eyes and landed in Shuligua's eyes. Shuligua's body trembled and his eyes were filled with confusion. At this moment, he could clearly feel endless information directly enter his body from the void. He had a feeling of his nascent soul leaving his body like back when he was a nascent soul cultivator. He gradually became lost within the information. Juyi released his hand and the golden light disappeared from his eyes. He looked tired. To gift his own inheritance to someone else like this would damage his spirit body. However, he didn't care. If Wang Lin could go through all the danger to save him, he himself wouldn't care about the difficulty of passing on his inheritance to help Wang Lin's sword spirit. "Wang Lin, your sword spirit was born with a rebellious nature, so you have to be careful when using it in the future. However, you don't have to worry about it too much. I have already left a hidden imprint inside the inheritance. If he tries to betray you, he will suffer backlash from the inheritance." Wang Lin looked at Juyi. The fatigue on Juyi's face made him sigh deeply. He clasped his hands and softly said, "Senior, thank you." Juyi's actions were always decisive, just like how he forcibly gifted Sun Tai as a slave to Wang Lin. Juyi shook his head and said, "As long as Ting can awaken, this inheritance is useless to me. Wang Lin, I only ask one thing of you, help me find Ting-er's father." Wang Lin pondered for a long time before nodding. Juyi faintly smiled and his right hand reached out. He grabbed the celestial sword that Shuligua was in. He held the sword, took a deep breath, and suddenly slapped it. This slap caused the celestial sword to release a fierce hum, and a strange gas came out from the sword before dissipating. Juyi's complexion became extremely pale. His body gradually turned transparent and it took a long time for him to recover. Wang Lin exclaimed, "Senior Juyi, he didn't expect Juyi to do this. From now on there are only 3 rain celestial swords. As for this sword, it now belongs to you. Whether it is the sword spirit before me, or the sword spirit after me, we will have no right to control this sword." After Juyi finished speaking, he threw the celestial sword at Wang Lin. Wang Lin caught the sword with gratitude in his eyes. This could be considered a huge gift from Juyi. There was a total of 4 rain celestial swords. Even if someone were to steal one, as long as juyi existed, they would merely hold temporary control over it. Once they encountered juyi, he would immediately regain control of the sword. Even if juyi no longer existed, if one day the white-robed woman awakens, she could create another sword spirit for the rain celestial swords. The sword spirit would receive the ancient sword intent inheritance and would control the 4 rain celestial swords. It could be said that these 4 rain celestial swords would always belong to sword spirits and the white-robed woman, no matter how much time passes or how many reincarnations happen. However, at this moment, everything changed. That slap was from juyi as the sword spirit and as the inheritor of the ancient sword intent. That slap shattered the imprint placed on the sword over the countless years. As the sword spirit of this generation, he was like a mortal emperor. He had divided a portion of his own territory and forever gave it to Wang Lin. From now on, even if the white-robed woman awakens or a new sword spirit forms, they won't be able to control this sword anymore. That's because this was a decree from this generation's sword spirit, juyi. It was comparable to a mortal emperor's royal decree. In addition to this, juyi allowed Shuligua to comprehend the ancient sword intent. He opened a door for Shuligua, a door to become a supreme sword spirit. These 2 amazing gifts were equal to giving Wang Lin a big chance. A chance to obtain a celestial sword that wouldn't be destroyed even after countless reincarnations, like the white-robed woman. From now on, this celestial sword will forever belong to Wang Lin. Even Shuligua will merely be the first-generation sword spirit for this sword. In the celestial realm, only those that obtain the rank of celestial lord can have this chance. Juyi let out a sigh. Then his body turned blurry and he entered the celestial sword. I can feel the aura of the last generation rain celestial sword spirit at the bottom of the tide abyss. This is my 3rd gift to you. Let us go. The celestial sword juyi was inflashed and charged into the depths of the abyss. Wang Lin put Shuligua, who was still in a daze and comprehending the inheritance, back into the celestial sword and chased after juyi. The aura of the last generation's rain celestial sword spirit? Could it be wealth? Wang Lin's heart trembled. Juyi was in front, and with his sword energy charging in front, all obstacles retreated. They arrived directly at the bottom of the tide abyss. This place was a huge, winding corridor with an endless pit in the bottom. It was so deep that not even divine sense could reach the bottom. Strands of faint suction power came from the giant hole. Although it was very faint, it was always there. Standing on the path next to the edge of the hole, a small amount of soil rolled off the edge and was sucked into the deep pit. Wang Lin took a deep breath and looked at the deep pit. With his cunning, he almost immediately guessed that the tide phase that occurred outside was caused by this deep pit. In Wang Lin's mind, he seemed to see the deep pit's eruption creating unimaginable suction force every 5,000 years. Then, through a mysterious channel, the suction force affects the outside world and sucks in countless things into this land. The mysteries of creation caused Wang Lin to feel his own insignificance. What kind of spell could withstand this eruption of suction force every 5,000 years? What kind of spell could reach such power? Even the All-Seer can't do this. I wonder if the person that the All-Seer said has stepped into the 3rd step could. Wang Lin took a deep breath and began to ponder. Where did this pit lead to? Wang Lin didn't know and also wasn't able to guess. However, he knew that if he fell in, it would be impossible to get out. This deep pit is very strange, don't look at it for too long. Juyi's voice came from the celestial sword. Wang Lin withdrew his gaze, but at the moment he did so, he suddenly heard a very faint voice. Go down. This voice didn't come from the deep pit, but from Wang Lin's bag of holding. It wasn't Yao Shishue. Wang Lin's pupils immediately shrank and he looked down at his bag of holding. He split a piece of his divine sense to enter the bag of holding and found that the mysterious scroll he found back on Suzaku had automatically opened. There was a violet light coming from the scroll, creating the shadow of a woman. This figure was extremely beautiful. With her back toward Wang Lin, it was as if she kept softly whispering. Go down. Wang Lin wasn't unfamiliar with the beautiful figure inside the scroll. Back on Suzaku, when he had to deal with the beasts the third ancestor released, this figure from within the scroll appeared and took control of those beasts. Wang Lin had always been puzzled about this scroll. Right after he reached the ascendant stage, he took out the scroll when he was in the soul refining tribe and made no progress. Although he could leave an imprint on the scroll, he couldn't control it. At this moment, the figure in the scroll appeared once more. Wang Lin sent out a divine sense message. Go down this deep pit? The figure softly whispered again, go down. Wang Lin's eyes lit up and he withdrew his divine sense. He looked down at the deep pit. The pit was completely dark, and all he could see was darkness. After pondering a bit, Wang Lin withdrew his gaze and chased after Juyi. Could there be something inside the deep pit that is related to the scroll? Wang Lin chased after Juyi while pondering. Juyi's voice came from the front. There is a mysterious force inside the pit that affects the mind. If one's mind isn't strong enough, they will fall in. Juyi reminded again, don't look anymore and continue flying. Wang Lin nodded and focused his mind. As he flew with Juyi through the corridor, the suction from the pit would suddenly become strong or weak. After an unknown amount of time, the celestial sword Juyi was in suddenly stopped, and Wang Lin stopped as well. They were already at the eastern part of the corridor, and the path before them was completely dark. Be careful, there is something strange about the pit. Just as Juyi's voice came out, a purple mist suddenly came out from the pit and surrounded the area. Juyi's voice became somewhat illusory inside the mist. Wang Lin's eyes became cold. This mist's appearance was simply too strange. Not only did this mist block sight, it also limited divine sense to less than 30 feet. When he extended any more than that, the divine sense would disappear as if it was devoured by the mist. Even at 30 feet, what he could see with his divine sense was somewhat blurry. At the same time, the suction from the pit seemed to increase with the appearance of the mist. However, this suction had no effect on the mist itself. It was extremely strange. There was a flash of sword light in the mist in front of Wang Lin, and then Juyi's celestial sword flew over. It circled around Wang Lin, and Juyi sent a divine sense message. Forget it. Climb up, Wang Lin, and I'll take you over. This mist is a bit strange, I'm afraid there might be danger with your strength. Wang Lin didn't waste time and stepped onto the celestial sword. A surge of celestial spiritual energy came from the sword into Wang Lin's feet and flowed through his entire body. Stabilize your energy, focus your mind, and don't let the celestial spiritual energy escape. Juyi's words echoed in Wang Lin's mind. Wang Lin immediately did what Juyi said, and the celestial spiritual energy inside his body suddenly trembled. It left his meridians and formed a glittering screen of celestial spiritual energy. Not only did the screen of light contain celestial spiritual energy, it also contained sword energy. The screen spread out and the mist was suddenly pushed back. A tunnel in the mist was formed as if a pair of giant hands had opened a path. Juyi turned into a ray of light while carrying Wang Lin and flew directly through the purple mist. As the celestial sword flew through, the purple mist was pushed away. Even when the purple mist wasn't pushed away by the screen, the powerful sword energy from the celestial sword made the purple mist disappear. The celestial sword was too fast, so fast that Wang Lin felt the powerful wind hit his face. The purple mist seemed to have turned into purple dragons that passed the corners of his eyes in the matter of a few breaths of time. After a long time, the celestial sword suddenly made a turn, tilted upwards, and began flying in a spiral. Wang Lin cycled the celestial spiritual energy in his body to stabilize himself so he wouldn't be thrown off the celestial sword. The aura of the last generation's rain celestial sword spirit is just ahead. Wang Lin, stabilize yourself, I'm about to go at full speed. After Juyi finished speaking, he gave Wang Lin a few seconds to prepare himself. Then the celestial sword suddenly accelerated. It was so fast that it even began to create afterimages. It was as if it was teleporting. Wang Lin stood on the celestial sword and felt like 100,000 mountains had just passed by him. He was no longer breathing and was holding a mouthful of celestial spiritual energy. If it was real teleportation, it would have been fine, and Wang Lin wouldn't have felt like this. However, this wasn't teleportation, but they had achieved speed equal to teleportation. The celestial screen distorted and deformed until it was sticking to Wang Lin's body. The celestial sword reached an unimaginable speed. Wang Lin could even see that the mist around him had turned into a sea of mist. This was an illusion caused by the fact that they were going too fast. The feeling that he only had when he had just entered the cultivation world hundreds of years ago appeared once more. This made him quite melancholy. This is the real celestial sword and sword spirit. Although my celestial sword has this strength, the sword spirit is not strong enough to use its full power. Although Shuligua has a rebellious nature, this devil likes to bully the weak but fears the strong. This devil won't be able to escape from me. Just at this moment, the purple mist began to churn and began to expand. Then a powerful suction force suddenly came from the bottomless pit where the mist came from. The powerful suction force came too suddenly. The mist that was originally not affected by this suction force was also quickly sucked into the deep pit. The suction force from the pit became stronger and stronger, causing the mist to be quickly sucked into the pit. At the same time, some fine gravel along the walls were also sucked in. At this moment, in the corridor in the distance, there was a large sword stuck in the wall. It began to tremble and started to move little by little out of the wall. Finally, with a bang, it was pulled out from the wall and went directly toward the pit due to the suction force. At this moment, the sword Juyi was in flew by. Wang Lin was able to recognize the familiar big golden sword going toward the deep pit. Juyi didn't hesitate to turn around and turn toward the deep pit toward the big sword. The suction forces inside and outside the deep pit were extremely different. Now that Juyi flew into the pit and was flying toward it, his speed was faster than lightning. In the blink of an eye, they caught up to the big, golden sword. Wang Lin revealed a look of decisiveness while on the celestial sword and immediately caught the big sword. However, the deep pit suction force had already wrapped around the big sword. Now that Wang Lin grabbed the sword, it was the same as stealing a treasure from the deep pit and fighting against the suction force. The moment he grabbed it, there was suddenly a powerful pull. Wang Lin's body became unstable for a moment and he almost fell off the celestial sword. At this moment of crisis, Wang Lin took a deep breath and Underworld River suddenly appeared around him. Under Wang Lin's control, the Underworld River began to spiral violently around him, forming a vortex with him at the center. The suction on Wang Lin weakened and then he immediately pulled on the sword. The big sword stopped falling into the pit and was slowly pulled back. A roar came from Juyi, and the roar seemed to contain a sword spirit spell. The sword released a flash of light and Juyi suddenly pulled Wang Lin toward the opening of the pit. Wang Lin felt like his body was about to be torn apart. The big sword in his right hand seemed to have infinite weight. He stood on the celestial sword and the veins on his face popped. As Juyi's charged upward, the big sword was slowly pulled up as well. Wang Lin's eyes were filled with determination. At this moment, he mustn't let go. He was afraid this sword would never see the light of day again if he let go. While Juyi charged up, the big sword held by Wang Lin slowly flew up as well. The gold on the sword had all fallen off, revealing a completely black sword. The remaining jewels on the hilt of the sword had all shattered and had been sucked into the deep pit. Juyi let out a roar, increasing the power of the celestial sword, and the big sword was pulled up several dozen more feet. Wang Lin used more celestial spiritual energy and made the Underworld River spin even faster. This constantly weakened the suction force. Finally, Juyi rushed out of the deep pit with Wang Lin. At the moment they charged out, Wang Lin let out a roar. The big sword was pulled out and landed in Wang Lin's hand. There was a shallow word carved on the big sword, wealth. While holding wealth, many memories from the past flashed across Wang Lin's mind. He took a deep breath, and before he had time to look, Juyi quickly pulled him away down a corridor nearby. Juyi's speed was very quick as he moved through the corridor. Wang Lin sent out a divine sense message to Juyi, leading him to the only exit in the Tide Abyss, the exit at the Fire Demon country. Wang Lin held wealth in his hand and carefully looked at it before putting it in his bag of holding. That glance earlier allowed him to see some clues about the sword. If his cultivation wasn't enough, he wouldn't have seen anything, but now that his cultivation had reached the ascendant stage, it was different. However, right now was not the time to study, so he put it inside his bag of holding. Wang Lin was prepared to carefully study it after leaving the tide abyss. The trip to the tide abyss is complete. Unfortunately, I have no clue where the mysterious token is, Wang Lin began to ponder. Inside Wang Lin's bag of holding, the mosquito beast opened its eyes and revealed a hint of doubt. Normally, when inside the bag of holding, unless it used an amazing spell, it shouldn't be able to feel what was outside. However, at this moment, he felt that there were many auras that gave him a very familiar feeling. After hesitating for a bit, the mosquito still couldn't figure it out. It looked at the still sleeping Thunder Toad, laid down on the Thunder Toad's back, and closed its eyes. With juyi speed, they got closer and closer to the Fire Demon country's exist. At the same time, they were getting closer and closer to the mist and the large amount of mosquitoes surrounding Greed and his group. In the Demon Spirit Land, a cloud was flying closer from the south. This cloud was filled with celestial spiritual energy as if was something from the celestial realm. It released bursts of light, and as it flew across the sky, it filled the sky with color. There were two people standing on this auspicious cloud, a man and a woman. The male was in an upright posture, wearing a blue robe with azure clouds embroidered on them, and the clouds even gave off ripples. His long hair flowed behind him, revealing a handsome face. He faced the wind and held a green jade flute in his hand. Along with how his cloth fluttered in the wind, he was like a celestial. Behind him, the woman was wearing a lavender dress embroidered with small, pink flowers. Her hair was loosely tied into a bun with a lavender hairpin inside. Although it looked casual, it didn't lose its elegance. She had light makeup on, and her lips were red without the use of any cinnabar. It could be said that her body was soft and her aura was fragrant. The woman's eyes would occasionally look at the man beside her, and her eyes contained tenderness. It was obvious these two were a cultivation couple. Although normal cultivators could ride clouds and fog, they were normal white clouds and fog made from water vapor. These kinds of spells were considered low quality. Not only was that method not fast, but there wasn't anything special about it. It was only used by some people to pretend to be celestials to fool mortals. However, this cultivation pair was different. This cloud was refined from the ninth heaven cloud. Even back before the collapse of the celestial realm, it was extremely rare. The power of this cloud lay in the fact that it naturally contained celestial lightning, so its power was naturally not to be underestimated. The older generation of cultivators would immediately recognize the two after seeing the cloud. The reason was that only people at the same realm as the blood ancestor, Ling Qianhu, and the All-Seer could ride on a cloud like that. The celestial cloud cultivation couple. The cultivation couple that came to the demon spirit land back then with Ling Qianhu and the All-Seer. They occupied one of caves and hadn't left for tens of thousands of years. Wang Wei, Hu Huan. These two people's cultivation could already match the All-Seer and company. Adding on the fact that the two were good at working together, even All-Seer was extremely cautious of them. What the All-Seer dreaded even more was the origin of those two. These two people's identities were extremely mysterious. Even the All-Seer couldn't find out anything about them. He only vaguely knew that these two people had been cultivating for longer than even him. Luckily, these two had a very peaceful nature and didn't like to fight for power. As long as one didn't provoke them, there would be no problem. If the short old man saw these two people, he would definitely immediately recognize them and gnash his teeth. These two were the people that stole a bag of holding from him back then. The two of them rode the cloud and flew directly toward the Fire Demon country. At the moment the cloud entered the Fire Demon country, Bei Lu, who was under the capital of the Sky Demon country, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes gave off a very bright, golden light, but that light soon disappeared. They actually left the cave. It looks like I have to increase the speed of devouring the other ancient demon souls. There was a very well-hidden sense of dread in Bei Lu's eyes. As the celestial cloud flew directly into the Fire Demon country, all of the clouds in the sky were forced out of the way. Even the demon generals and soldiers in the cities were all shaken. They didn't dare to fly out to check at all. Not long after, the celestial cloud stopped at the tide abyss exit. The cloud gradually disappeared and the two landed. The man's eyes were filled with interest as he smiled at the woman next to him. Interesting. Huan, there are some restrictions here. These restrictions are pretty clever. The woman's eyes were filled with joy as she said, with a graceful voice, there aren't many restrictions that can arouse your interest. This video will end here.